On a Tuesday, I was a dad. I was lying on the living room floor, surrounded by a hastily constructed fortress of sofa cushions and bed sheets, while my 7-year-old daughter, Lily, read me a story from a book she had written herself. It was a story about a unicorn who was also a firefighter. In her version of the world, a thing could be both magical and brave. I was listening to her sound out the big words, my heart so full of a quiet, ordinary love that it felt like it might actually burst. On Tuesday, I was a dad. By Friday, according to a legally filed, notarized court document, I was a monster. The difference between those two realities was my ex-wife, Karen. This is a story about a lie, a big, ugly, and almost perfectly constructed lie, designed by a person I once loved, for the sole purpose of destroying my life. But it's also a story about the truth, and how it sometimes shows up in the most unexpected of places, from the most unexpected of witnesses. Have you ever had someone take a memory you shared and twist it into a weapon to use against you? To have your own life explained back to you in the most distorted, malicious way possible. It's a special kind of violation. If you've ever been the victim of a smear campaign, you know the helpless, furious feeling I'm talking about. So hit that subscribe button. You and I have a lot to discuss. Karen and I had been divorced for 2 years. Our marriage hadn't ended with a bang, but with a slow, sad whimper. We were two good people who had just grown in different directions. I was a graphic designer. I loved my quiet, creative, and not particularly lucrative life. Karen wanted more. She was brilliant and ambitious, and she had a hunger for a bigger, shinier world than the one I could provide for her. She got a high-powered job in marketing. She started to dress in expensive suits, and she started to look at our quiet, comfortable life with a kind of pitying, condescending boredom. The divorce was her idea, and while it broke my heart, I understood. I let her go. The one perfect, beautiful thing that had come from our marriage was our daughter, Lily. And for the past 2 years, we had managed to co-parent with a kind of cool, polite efficiency. I had her on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and every other weekend. And my days with her were the sun around which my entire world revolved. Our time together was a collection of small, happy rituals, pancake Saturdays, where we would make a glorious, flour-dusted mess of the kitchen, Tuesday night pillow forts, Thursday trips to the library. I was not a perfect father. I was sometimes tired, sometimes distracted, but I was a good father. I was an engaged father. And Lily and I, we were a team. She was a happy, bright, and deeply loved little girl, or so I thought. The papers arrived on a Friday afternoon. A man in a cheap suit knocked on my door and handed me a thick, intimidatingly official-looking envelope. "You've been served," he'd said. And then he'd walked away. I sat at my kitchen table, the one where Lily and I did her homework, and I opened the envelope. The words inside were a foreign language of legal jargon, but the meaning was clear, and it was a punch to the gut. It was a petition from my ex-wife, Karen, to the family court. She was suing for sole, emergency custody of our daughter, Lily. And then I read the reasons why. It was a 10-page document, a work of fiction so elaborate, so detailed, and so full of twisted half-truths that it must have taken her weeks to write. It was a meticulously crafted portrait of me as an unfit, unstable, and negligent father. I read it, and the world seemed to tilt on its axis. She had taken every normal, everyday moment of my life as a father, and she had twisted it into something ugly, something sinister. I had, a month ago, taken Lily to the park. She had been climbing on the monkey bars, had slipped, and had gotten a big dramatic scrape on her knee. She had cried. I had cleaned it. I had kissed it. I had put a cartoon Band-Aid on it, and we had gotten ice cream, a normal, everyday childhood event, in Karen's sworn affidavit. This became, the father has shown a pattern of negligent supervision. On numerous occasions. The child has returned from his care with unexplained bruises and injuries. I am deeply concerned for her physical safety when she is with him. I remembered a phone call from a few weeks prior. I had been having a hard day. An old friend had just been diagnosed with a serious illness, and I was heartbroken. I had been sad on the phone with my own mother. Lily had overheard, and had asked me why I was sad. I had explained to her. in simple, age-appropriate terms, that sometimes adults get sad when their friends are sick, but that it was okay to be sad, and that I would be okay. A normal, healthy conversation about emotions. In Karen's affidavit, this became, the father has exhibited signs of severe emotional instability. He has been known to have crying fits in front of the child, creating a chaotic and frightening emotional environment that is detrimental to her development. On and on it went, page after page of my own life, my own love for my daughter, distorted into a grotesque caricature of a monster. My quiet, artistic nature was reframed as unpredictable mood swings. My modest, freelance designer's income was reframed as financial instability. The very pillow forts we built were described as evidence of a chaotic and unstructured home environment. It was a masterpiece of gaslighting, a work of art. She had taken every single one of my strengths as a father, my emotional honesty, my creative and playful nature, my focus on love over material things, and she had reframed them as my greatest weaknesses. I sat there, in my quiet apartment, and I felt a rage so profound, so absolute. It was a physical thing. This was not about Lily's well-being. This was a character assassination. It was a power play, designed to punish me for being happy without her, for building a life that was not a part of her own, shiny, corporate world. She couldn't control me anymore. So she was trying to take the one thing that mattered to me most in the entire world. I called her, of course. My hands were shaking. My voice was a low, dangerous growl I didn't recognize. She answered on the second ring, her voice as cool and as calm as a frozen lake. "Hello, David. I got the papers." "Karen," I said through gritted teeth. "What the hell is this? What is this mountain of lies you have just submitted to a court of law?" "It's not lies, David," she said, her voice full of a practiced, apathetic sigh. "It's concern. I am concerned about our daughter. Your lifestyle is unstable. I think she needs the stability of one home, mine." "Unstable," I shouted, my own voice now cracking. "I am the most stable part of her entire life. I am the one who is there, every single Tuesday and Thursday. To help her with her homework, I am the one who goes to every single parent-teacher conference. When was the last time you even went to one?" "Karen, I am a very busy woman." "David," she said coolly, "I have a career, something you wouldn't understand. And my career is what will provide Lily with the future she deserves, a future of stability and opportunity, something you, with your little freelance projects, cannot give her." And there it was, the real reason. It wasn't about my fitness as a father. It was about my income, my status, my failure to live up to her new, glittering standards. "I will fight this, Karen," I whispered, my voice a raw, broken sound. "I will fight you with everything I have." "You do that," she said with a dismissive, humorless laugh. "My lawyer is the best in the city. What do you have? A portfolio of cartoon logos and a bleeding heart. Good luck with that." And she hung up. I sat there, in the gathering darkness, the legal documents spread out on my table like a death sentence. And for the first time since our divorce, I felt a real, profound, and deeply terrifying fear. What if she won? What if the court believed her lies? She was rich, she was powerful, she was a master of manipulation, and I was just a dad who loved his daughter more than his own life. In the war that was to come, I knew that my love was supposed to be my greatest weapon. But as I sat there, alone in my quiet apartment, I had the terrible, sinking feeling that in a court of law, in a world that so often values the appearance of success over the quiet truth of a good heart, my love was not going to be nearly enough. The first step in fighting a war is to find a good general. I knew I couldn't fight Karen on my own. She was a master of a kind of psychological warfare I was not equipped to handle, and her high-priced lawyer was a hired gun. I, on the other hand, was just a graphic designer with a dwindling savings account and a profound, bone-deep sense of terror. I found my general in a small, unassuming law office above a bookstore. Her name was Jessica Albright, a woman in her 40s with sharp, intelligent eyes and a calm, steady demeanor that was the polar opposite of my own panicked state. I sat in her office and I laid out the whole, ugly story, my hands shaking as I pushed the 10-page document of Karen's lies across her desk. She read it in silence, her expression unreadable. When she was finished, she took off her glasses and looked at me. "Well," she said, her voice a calm, dry sound. "Your ex-wife has a very creative imagination. This is a classic smear campaign. David, it's designed to overwhelm you, to isolate you, and to make you look like an unstable monster before you even step foot in a courtroom." She leaned forward. "The truth, I have learned, does not always win in family court. The best story does. And right now, your ex-wife is telling a very, very compelling story. Our job is to tell a better one, a truer one." Her words were not exactly comforting, but they were honest. And they were a call to action. The weeks that followed, leading up to the custody hearing, were the longest and most difficult of my life. Karen's campaign of lies, which had begun with that legal document, now moved out into the real world. She was not just trying to convince a judge. She was trying to poison my entire life. It started with our mutual friends. I got a phone call one evening from my best friend, Mark, the man who had been the best man at my wedding. His voice was awkward, hesitant. "Hey, Dave," he began. "Listen, man, this is really uncomfortable, but Karen called me. She was a wreck, crying. She told me some things about you, about how you've been struggling, that you've been having some real emotional ups and downs since the divorce." I just stood there, my phone pressed to my ear, a cold, sick feeling washing over me. She was calling my best friend and painting me as a basket case. "She said she's worried about you, man," Mark continued, his voice full of a confused sympathy that was all for her. "She said she's worried about Lily being around you when you're in one of your moods." "Moods," I repeated, my voice a hollow whisper. "Mark, what are you talking about? You know me. Do I have moods?" "I don't know, man," he said, and his hesitation was a dagger in my heart. "I just know that she sounded really, really scared for you." That was Karen's genius. She didn't present her lies as accusations. She presented them as concern. She wasn't an angry ex-wife. She was a worried mother, desperately trying to protect her child from an unstable father. It was a brilliant, and deeply evil, narrative. And it was working. The calls from other friends stopped coming. My invitations to our usual weekend barbecues dried up. I was being quietly, politely, and systematically excommunicated from my own life. But the most painful part of her campaign, the part that truly broke my heart, was her manipulation of our daughter. Lily, my sweet, happy 7-year-old girl, began to change. She would come home to my apartment after a few days with her mother, and she would be quiet, withdrawn. Her bright, easy smile replaced by a small, worried frown. She would ask me strange, probing questions that a 7-year-old should never have to ask her father. "Daddy," she asked me one night, as we were reading a bedtime story, "are you sad all the time?" I looked down at her, my heart aching. "No, sweetie," I said gently. "Why would you ask that?" "Mommy says you're very sad since she left," she said, her own small face a mask of worry. "She says I have to be a very good girl for you, so I don't make your sadness worse." Karen was using our daughter as a therapist, as a tiny, unwilling spy. She was burdening her with my supposed emotional fragility, making her responsible for my well-being. It was a cruel psychological game. And Lily was the pawn. Another time, Lily came home and announced that she had to call her mother every single night before bed to check in. "Mommy says I have to tell her what we had for dinner," she'd explained, her eyes on the floor. "And if you ever shout," she says it's very important that I tell her if you ever shout. I felt a wave of pure, white-hot rage wash over me, followed by a profound, heartbreaking sadness. Karen was interrogating our daughter after every visit. She was turning my home, which was supposed to be a safe and happy place for Lily, into a place of surveillance. She was teaching our child that her father was a person to be watched, to be reported on. Fighting a liar is like wrestling with a ghost. You can't land a punch. Every time I thought I had my footing, Karen would create a new story, a new half-truth, a new concern. She was building a case out of thin air, and I was terrified the court would see her beautiful, compelling mirage and think it was a real, solid building. My lawyer, Jessica, gave me the only advice that mattered. "You cannot control her narrative, David," she'd said, "so you have to control yours. Be the best, most stable, most unimpeachable father you can possibly be. Document everything, but most of all, just be a great dad. Let the truth of your life be your defense. So that's what I did. I started a journal. I wrote down every single manipulative question Lily asked me. I documented every single time Karen was late for a pickup, every passive-aggressive comment she made. I was building my own file, my own book of evidence. But more than that, I focused on my daughter. I made our small, simple apartment a fortress of love and stability. I shut out the noise of Karen's war, and I focused on the quiet, beautiful work of being a father. We had our pancake Saturdays. We built magnificent, sprawling pillow forts. We worked on her homework, and we started a new project. A big one, for her third-grade class. Lily had to create a diorama of her favorite scene from her favorite book. Her favorite book was Charlotte's Web. For the next 2 weeks, our dining room table was a happy, chaotic mess of shoeboxes and glue and paint and pipe cleaners. We worked on it together every night. I helped her build the little barn out of popsicle sticks. She, with her own innate artistic talent, sculpted a tiny, perfect Wilbur the pig out of clay, and a beautiful, wise Charlotte the spider out of silver wire and beads. The diorama was a masterpiece. It was a small, perfect, and deeply loving tribute to a story about friendship and loyalty. It was a tangible piece of evidence of our own happy, healthy partnership. And as we worked, I saw my daughter slowly begin to come back to me. The worried frown was replaced by a smile of concentration. The quiet, withdrawn little girl was replaced by an excited, chattering artist. Our little project was a form of therapy. It was a way for us to rebuild our own happy world. A world that Karen's poison could not touch. The day we took it to school, Lily was so proud she was practically vibrating. She carried the shoebox into her classroom as if it were the crown jewels. Her teacher, a young, kind-faced woman named Ms. Evans, was just as impressed. "Mr. Miller," she said to me that afternoon, when I came to pick Lily up, it's a work of art, the detail, the care that went into it. Lily told me you two worked on it together every night. "We did," I said with a smile. "It was a team effort." "Well, it shows," she said, her own smile warm and genuine. "She is a wonderful, bright, and deeply creative little girl, and she is so lucky to have such an involved, supportive dad." Her words, her simple, unprompted words of validation, were a gift. In a world that was beginning to see me as a monster, this one, quiet, observant woman saw the truth. She saw me as a good father. I walked home from school that day with Lily, holding her small hand in mine, and I felt a flicker of hope for the first time in weeks. The court date was just a few days away. I was terrified, but I had my own evidence now. I had my journal of Karen's manipulations, and I had a shoebox full of popsicle sticks and clay, a small, perfect testament to the truth. I didn't know it then, but I had one other piece of evidence on my side. The most powerful piece of all. I had a quiet, observant, and deeply decent third-grade teacher who had been watching everything, and she, in her own quiet way, was about to become the most important witness in my entire life. The small, kind words from my daughter's third-grade teacher were a tiny, flickering candle in the vast, suffocating darkness of my life. "You're a great dad, Mr. Miller." In a world where my ex-wife's narrative was methodically painting me as a monster, this one, simple, unsolicited piece of validation from a near stranger felt like a lifeline. It was a reminder that the truth of my life, the truth of my love for my daughter, was still visible to those who were willing to look. That teacher's name was Miss Evans, and she, in her quiet, observant, and deeply decent way, was about to become the most important person in my entire life. As the court date loomed closer, the pressure from Karen's campaign of lies intensified. My life became a defensive crouch. I felt like I was constantly being watched, judged, and documented. I started every day with a new sense of dread, wondering what new, twisted story she had told, what new friend had been turned against me. But my lawyer, Jessica, had been right. My only viable defense was to be the most unimpeachable, most stable, and most loving father I could possibly be. My time with Lily became a sanctuary, a fortress of normalcy we built together against the chaos her mother was creating. We made our pancakes, we built our pillow forts, and we focused on the small, beautiful, and ordinary moments of a father and a daughter who loved each other. The parent-teacher conference was scheduled for a week before the hearing. It was a mandatory event. I signed up for a slot on a Tuesday, one of my custody days. Karen, I saw from the sign-up sheet, had taken a slot on Wednesday. I walked into Ms. Evans's classroom that afternoon, my heart a nervous drum against my ribs. The room was bright and cheerful, the walls covered in the chaotic, beautiful art of 7-year-olds. It was a happy place. Mrs. Evans greeted me with a warm, genuine smile. She was a young woman, probably not much older than 25, but she had a calm, confident, and deeply intelligent presence. She was one of those people who was born to be a teacher. "Mr. Miller," she said, gesturing for me to sit at one of the small student desks. "Thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to see you again." We spent the next 15 minutes talking about Lily. Ms. Evans was full of praise for my daughter's intelligence, for her creativity, for her kind and gentle spirit. "She is a joy to have in class," she said, her eyes shining with a real affection. Her imagination is just boundless. That diorama she made for her book report on Charlotte's Web, it was a masterpiece. The other children were in awe of it. "We had a lot of fun making it," I said with a smile. Then her expression grew a little more serious. "I did want to ask you, though," she began, her voice a little more cautious. "Is everything all right at home? I've noticed that Lily has been a little quieter than usual. These past few weeks, a little more anxious. She seems to have a lot on her mind." Her question, her quiet, professional concern, was a validation of everything I had been fearing. Karen's campaign was not just affecting me, it was affecting our daughter. I took a deep breath. "Her mother and I are having some disagreements about custody," I said. The words a massive, painful understatement. "It's a stressful time for all of us, especially for Lily." Ms. Evans just nodded, her expression full of a deep, professional empathy. "I understand," she said. "Well, please know that my classroom is a safe space for her, and if there is ever anything at all I can do to support her, or you, please do not hesitate to ask." I left that conference feeling a profound sense of gratitude. I had an ally, a quiet, unassuming, but deeply important one. I had a person, a respected professional in my daughter's life, who saw the truth, who saw me not as a monster, but as a dad. The next day, I learned, was Karen's parent-teacher conference, and it was, as I would later find out in excruciating detail, a completely different kind of meeting. Karen, as was her style, arrived 20 minutes late, a flurry of apologies and the scent of expensive perfume. She spent the first 5 minutes of her 15-minute slot on her phone, texting, while Ms. Evans waited patiently, and when she finally did put her phone away, her questions were not about Lily's reading level or her math skills. Her questions were about me. She had, with a masterful performance of a worried mother, tried to plant her poisonous seeds in the fertile ground of a teacher's concern for her student. "I'm just so worried about her when she's with her father," Karen had sighed, her voice a low, confidential whisper. "He's been so unstable lately. His moods are all over the place. Does she seem sad to you after she comes back from his house? Does she seem frightened?" She was trying to use Miss Evans as a pawn in her game, as a source for evidence to support her lies, but she had underestimated the quiet, observant, third-grade teacher, Ms. Evans, as she would later testify, had just looked at Karen and said, her voice a calm, professional, and impenetrable wall, "Lily is a wonderful, happy child, Mrs. Miller. And in my professional observation, she seems to thrive on the days she is with her father." Karen's attempt to poison the well had failed. She had, in fact, only succeeded in raising a massive red flag in the mind of the one person whose professional opinion would soon matter more than any other. The final piece of the puzzle, the final act of Karen's casual, self-absorbed negligence, happened on the day of the third-grade field trip to the Science Museum. I had, of course, volunteered to be a chaperone. I had taken the day off work. I was genuinely excited to be there, to see the museum through my daughter's eyes. Karen was supposed to have packed Lily's lunch that morning, but when it was time to eat, I watched as Lily opened her backpack and her face fell, It was empty. Karen had forgotten. My daughter's eyes welled up with tears, not of anger, but of a quiet, familiar disappointment. Mommy forgot my lunch again. She'd whispered to me, as if it were a secret she was ashamed of. My heart broke for her, but I just smiled. Don't you worry, sweetie, I said. Daddy's got this. I went to Ms. Evans, I explained the situation, and I ran down to the museum cafeteria and bought my daughter a lunch. A hot dog and a bag of chips and a juice box. A simple, small act of parental competence. But Ms. Evans had seen it all. She had seen Karen's failure to perform a basic act of maternal care, and she had seen my quiet, immediate, and loving response. She didn't say anything. She just gave me a small, sad, and deeply understanding look. She was a quiet observer, and she was taking notes. The court date was 3 days away. I was in my lawyer's office for our final strategy meeting. I had given her my journal, my meticulous record of Karen's campaign of lies and manipulation. This is good, David, Jessica had said, looking through my notes. It shows a clear pattern of parental alienation. It's strong, she sighed, but it is still. In a court of law, your word against hers. She will get on the stand and she will cry, and she will be a very sympathetic, very convincing victim. We need more. We need an impartial, third-party witness, a character witness who can speak to your stability, and to her lack of it. I don't know who to ask, I said, feeling a familiar wave of despair. She's turned most of our friends against me. Jessica was quiet for a moment, her eyes scanning her notes. Then she looked up at me, a new, sharp, and strategic light in her eyes. What about her teacher, she asked. Miss Evans. You've mentioned her several times. You say she's been supportive, that she sees you as a good father. My first thought was, absolutely not. I can't, I said, shaking my head. I can't drag her into this. She's a teacher. She's a young woman just starting her career. Karen's lawyer will tear her apart on the stand. It's not fair to her. David, Jessica said, her voice firm. This is not about being fair. This is about keeping your daughter, a teacher, a respected professional, an impartial observer who sees your child every single day, is the single most powerful and credible character witness we could possibly have. Her testimony. It could be the thing that wins us this case. I was torn. My instinct was to protect Miss Evans from the ugly, brutal mess of my own life. But then I thought about Lily. I thought about her sad, anxious face. I thought about her mother, slowly poisoning her heart against me. My duty to protect my daughter was greater than my desire to protect a kind stranger from a difficult afternoon in a courtroom. I looked at my lawyer, and I made the decision. Okay, I said, my voice a quiet, resigned whisper. Do it, call her. Jessica just nodded, a small, grim smile on her face. She picked up her pen. What's her full name and the address of the school? I gave her the information, and as I did, I pictured it. I pictured a formal, legal process server walking into that bright, cheerful, third-grade classroom and handing Miss Evans a subpoena, a legal document that would drag her from her quiet, orderly world of books and children's art and into the ugly, chaotic war zone of my custody battle. The quiet observer was about to be called to the front lines, and I prayed that I had not just made a terrible, terrible mistake. The day of the custody hearing arrived like a verdict that had already been decided. I walked into the sterile, soulless building of the family court feeling like a condemned man on his way to the gallows. The air in the waiting area was thick with the silent, anxious misery of a dozen other families, all there to have their lives dissected and judged under the harsh, fluorescent lights of the law. Across the hall, I saw her, my ex-wife, Karen. She was dressed in a severe, dark gray suit, her hair pulled back in a tight, professional bun. She looked like a grieving, but powerful, CEO. She was flanked by her lawyer, a man whose expensive suit and confident smirk probably cost more than my car. When she saw me, she didn't look away. She gave me a small, cold, and deeply confident nod. It was the nod of a person who knew, with absolute certainty, that she was about to win. My own lawyer, Jessica, a good, decent woman who was hopelessly outgunned, put a reassuring hand on my arm. Just breathe. David, she whispered, we just have to tell the truth. That's all we can do. But as we walked into the courtroom, a cold, sick feeling settled in my stomach. I was beginning to suspect that the truth was not going to be nearly enough. The courtroom was a small, wood-paneled, and deeply intimidating space. The judge, a stern-faced woman with tired eyes, looked down at us from her imposing bench as if she had already heard every lie we were about to tell. Karen's lawyer began first. He was a master, a true artist of character assassination. His opening statement was a beautiful, compelling, and completely fictional story. He painted a picture of his client, Karen, as a hard-working, successful mother who had made the difficult but necessary decision to leave a volatile and emotionally unstable marriage. He spoke of her deep and growing concern for her daughter's well-being. He told the story of a loving mother, desperately trying to protect her child from a father who was, through no fault of his own, he added with a touch of magnanimous pity, spiraling. And then he called his first, and only, witness to the stand, my ex-wife. Karen's performance was worthy of an Oscar. She walked to the witness stand, her movements slow and deliberate, a picture of fragile, reluctant strength. She spoke in a low, trembling voice, dabbing at her eyes with a perfectly folded tissue. Her lawyer led her through her prepared testimony, a greatest hits collection of my supposed failures as a father. "Mrs. Miller," he began, his voice full of a gentle, paternal concern. "Can you tell the court about the incident at the park last month?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice cracking. Lily came home and she had this terrible, deep scrape on her knee. She was so upset. She said her father had been distracted, talking on his phone, not watching her. It was a lie. Of course, I had been pushing her on the swings, and she had jumped off, as 7-year-olds do, and had fallen. I had been right there, but her lie was so much more compelling than the simple, boring truth. "And can you tell the court about Mr. Miller's emotional state since the divorce?" She took a shaky breath. He's not the man I married," she sobbed. "He has these crying spells, out of nowhere. Lily told me about one. She said she found him in the living room, just weeping. It frightened her. It frightened me. I don't think he is emotionally equipped to be a primary caregiver right now." She was talking about the day my friend had been diagnosed with cancer, the day I had been sad, a normal, human moment of grief, which she had now twisted into a symptom of a profound mental illness. Jessica, my lawyer, did her best on the cross-examination, but Karen was a fortress of lies. She was unshakable. "Mrs. Miller, isn't it true that your daughter's injury at the park was a simple, common scrape, the kind that all children get?" Jessica asked. "I'm not a doctor," Karen replied, dabbing her eyes. "I just know my daughter came home from her father's care, injured and frightened." "And isn't it true that Mr. Miller's crying spell was a single instance of him being upset after learning a close friend had been diagnosed with a life-threatening illness?" "I don't know the details of his social life," Karen said coolly. "I just know what my daughter told me. And she told me her father was crying uncontrollably, and it scared her. She was untouchable. Every single one of her answers was a masterpiece of deflection, of innuendo, of a mother's simple, undeniable concern. By the time she stepped down from the witness stand, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. The judge was looking at me with a new, hard, and deeply skeptical expression. Karen's story, as fictional as it was working. She was winning. Then it was my turn. I felt like a fool on the witness stand. I was not a performer. I was just a dad. And the truth, I was beginning to learn, sounds a lot like a series of clumsy, defensive excuses when you're in a court of law. Jessica led me through my side of the story. I explained about the scraped knee. I explained about my friend's cancer diagnosis. I talked about our pancake Saturdays, about our pillow forts, about the diorama we had built together. I talked about my love for my daughter. It all sounded so small, so insignificant compared to the high drama of Karen's testimony. And then came the cross-examination from her lawyer. He was a shark, and I was the bleeding swimmer in the water. He circled me, his questions a series of sharp, painful bites. "Mr. Miller," he began, his voice dripping with a false, polite sympathy, "you admit that you were, in your own words, crying uncontrollably in front of your 7-year-old daughter. I was not crying uncontrollably. I said, I was sad. But you were crying. Were you not, in a way that your daughter described to her mother as being frightening? I don't know what she told her mother, I stammered. I was just sad. And Mr. Miller, he continued, moving on to his next line of attack. As a freelance graphic designer, is it true that your income is, shall we say, inconsistent and unpredictable? It can be, I admitted. But I always make enough to pay my bills. Lily has never wanted for anything. But it is not as stable, as predictable, as your ex-wife's 6-figure salary as a marketing executive, is it? No, I said, my voice a small, defeated whisper. And, Mr. Miller, is it true that your daughter did, in fact, sustain a significant physical injury while under your sole supervision at the park? She scraped her knee, I said, my voice now rising with a frustrated anger. She's a 7-year-old girl. Kids scrape their knees. I have no further questions for this witness, Your Honor, he said with a smug, satisfied smile, as if my outburst had just proven his entire case. I walked back to my table, my face burning with a hot, helpless shame. He had done it. He had taken the simple, beautiful, and sometimes messy truth of my life as a father, and he had made it sound like a case of criminal negligence. He was a magician, and he was making the truth disappear right in front of my eyes. The judge looked down at me from her bench, her expression grim. She looked at Karen with a kind of weary sympathy, and then she looked at me with a look of profound and deeply disappointed disapproval. My lawyer, Jessica, put a hand on my arm. Her own face was pale. It's not looking good, David, she whispered, and in that moment, I felt the last of my own fight, the last of my own hope. Just go out. I was going to lose. After all of this, after all the lies, after all my efforts to be a good father, I was going to lose my daughter. Does the defense have any other witnesses to call? The judge asked, her voice already full of a tired, final boredom. She was ready to make her ruling. Jessica stood up. Yes, Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and strong. The defense calls one final character witness to the stand. Karen and her lawyer exchanged a look of amused, condescending surprise. A character witness, who was I going to call? The friends they had already turned against me. We call, Jessica announced, Ms. Eris Evans. The name just hung in the air for a moment. Ms. Evans, my daughter's 3rd-grade teacher. Karen actually let out a small, derisive laugh. Her lawyer was already on his feet, objecting. Your Honor, this is a waste of the court's time. A 3rd-grade teacher. What could she possibly have to say that is relevant to this case? But the judge, a woman who had likely seen 1,000 different courtroom tricks, just looked at my lawyer with a new, curious expression. She seemed to be intrigued by this unexpected, last-minute turn of events. I'll allow it, she said, a new, hard authority in her voice. Bailiff, please fetch Miss Evans from the witness room. I just stared at my lawyer, my own face a mask of confused, terrified hope. I had no idea what Ms. Evans was going to say. I had no idea if she would even be a good witness. I just knew that she, this quiet, kind, and observant 3rd-grade teacher, was my last and only hope. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and Miss Eris Evans walked in. She was a small, quiet figure in the large, intimidating room. She was wearing a simple, professional dress and a nervous but determined expression on her face. She looked like what she was, a 3rd-grade teacher who had been unwillingly dragged into the messy, ugly world of adults. My ex-wife, Karen, looked at her and let out a small, almost imperceptible sigh of relief, a tiny, triumphant smirk touching her lips. I knew what she was thinking. This is their witness, a school teacher. This is pathetic. She thought Ms. Evans was here to talk about Lily being sad, a fact Karen would then twist to her own advantage, blaming it on my supposed instability. She had no idea that the quiet, unassuming woman who was now taking the witness stand was not a witness for the defense. She was the star witness for the prosecution, and Karen was the one on trial. Miss Evans was sworn in, her voice a little shaky but clear. My lawyer, Jessica, approached the witness stand. Please state your name and occupation for the record, Jessica began. Eris Evans, she said, I am a third-grade teacher at Northwood Elementary School. And is it correct that the child at the center of this custody hearing, Lily Miller, is a student in your class? Yes, Ms. Evans said. She has been in my class for the past 8 months. Thank you. Ms. Evans, Jessica said, now, in your professional capacity as Lily's teacher. A capacity that I should note also makes you a state-mandated reporter for child welfare. Have you had any interactions with Lily's mother, Mrs. Karen Miller, that have given you cause for professional concern? Karen's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection, Your Honor, relevance. This hearing is about Mr. Miller's fitness as a parent, not Mrs. Miller's. The judge looked down at Karen's lawyer, then at Ms. Evans, then at my lawyer, a new sharp interest in her tired eyes. Mrs. Miller's conduct as a parent is absolutely relevant to determining the best interests of the child, she said. Her voice a dry, final ruling. Objection overruled. The witness will answer the question. Karen's lawyer sat down, a look of annoyed confusion on his face. Karen's triumphant smirk was gone, replaced by a small, worried frown. Jessica turned back to her witness. Miss Evans, you may answer. Yes, Ms. Evans said, her voice gaining strength. Her nervousness replaced by a quiet, professional resolve. Yes, I have. And then, for the next 45 minutes, that quiet, dedicated, and deeply observant third-grade teacher proceeded to systematically, factually, and with a devastating, unimpeachable professionalism, dismantle my ex-wife's entire case. She didn't use innuendo or emotional appeals. She used dates and times and her own meticulous records. She began with Karen's chronic tardiness. According to my own attendance logs and the school's official records, she said, consulting a small notebook she had brought with her. Mrs. Miller was more than 20 minutes late to pick up Lily from school, without calling to inform the office, on 12 separate occasions in the past semester alone. On 3 of those occasions, she was over an hour late, and Lily was the last child left at the school. I watched as Karen's face began to flush a dark, ugly red. Miss Evans then recounted the parent-teacher conference. I held 2 conferences this year, she said. Mr. Miller, the father, attended his on time. He was engaged. He asked thoughtful questions about Lily's progress, and we had a very productive, 30-minute conversation about her academic and social development. She then looked at Karen. Mrs. Miller was 25 minutes late for her scheduled conference. She spent the first 5 minutes of the meeting on her phone, answering emails, and when she did engage, her only questions were not about her daughter's schoolwork, but about her ex-husband's emotional state. She asked me, and I quote, if Lily seemed frightened after coming back from her father's house. The judge was now leaning forward, her pen flying across her legal pad. Then came the story of the field trip, Ms. Evans recounted, in clear, simple detail. The story of Karen forgetting to pack Lily a lunch, and of my own quick, quiet intervention. Lily was very embarrassed, she said, her voice full of a gentle sympathy. She was the only child in a class of 24 whose parent had forgotten. But the most damning testimony, the part that made the entire courtroom go completely, utterly silent, was a new story, a story I had never heard. About a month ago, Miss Evans began, her voice now a low, serious hum. Lily came to school on a Monday morning, after having spent the weekend with her mother. It was a very cold day, below freezing, and she was wearing a thin, spring jacket and shoes with holes in the toes. She was shivering. I felt a hot, protective rage surge through me. I took her aside privately, Ms. Evans continued, and I asked her if she had forgotten her winter coat, and she said, her voice so quiet I could barely hear her, no, Ms. Evans, this is the only one that fits me anymore. Mommy was supposed to take me shopping for a new one, but she was too busy getting ready for her party to do the laundry or to go to the store. Later that day, in the lunch line, Lily's lunch account was declined. There was no money in it. She had, once again, been sent to school with no lunch. Miss Evans looked at the judge, her own eyes now shining with a fierce, protective anger. That day, Your Honor, I used my own money to buy Lily a hot lunch from the cafeteria, and I took her to the nurse's office, and I found a winter coat for her in the lost and found. Her mother, Mrs. Miller, never called to inquire about any of it. The room was a tomb. The picture she was painting was not one of a concerned, loving mother. It was a picture of profound and deeply disturbing neglect. Karen was a ruin. Her face was a mess of splotchy red, her eyes full of a new, panicked terror. Her lawyer was just sitting there, his own face ashen, his brilliant, aggressive strategy now in absolute tatters. He had to cross-examine her. Of course, he had to try. It was a disaster. He approached the witness stand, his own confident swagger gone, replaced by a desperate, flailing aggression. "Ms. Evans," he began, his voice a little too loud. "You are a third-grade teacher, is that correct? You are not a trained psychologist or a social worker." "I am a state-certified educator," Ms. Evans replied, her voice unshakable. "And I am a state-mandated reporter with a decade of experience working with young children, and I know, from my professional training and my personal experience, the difference between a child who is loved and supported and a child who is being consistently and systematically neglected." Her words were a cannonball. He was staggered, but he tried again. "And you admit that you like Mr. Miller, don't you?" he sneered. "You think he is a good dad. Isn't that what you told him?" "I think Mr. Miller is a deeply engaged, profoundly loving, and incredibly reliable parent," she said, her voice ringing with a conviction that was absolute. "In my professional opinion, and based on my direct observations of his interactions with his daughter, he is the primary source of stability and safety in Lily's life." She then turned her gaze to Karen. "Mrs. Miller, on the other hand, I find her behavior to be erratic, self-absorbed, and deeply, deeply concerning. And just like that, the entire case, the entire narrative my ex-wife had so carefully, so brilliantly, and so maliciously constructed, was demolished. A quiet, honest, and deeply decent third-grade teacher had just walked into a court of law and had destroyed it in 15 minutes, using nothing but the simple, unadorned, and undeniable power of the truth. Karen's lawyer just stood there for a moment, and then he whispered, his voice a small, defeated sound. "I have no further questions." "Your Honor." Ms. Evans stepped down from the witness stand. The courtroom was a sea of stunned silence. Karen was openly weeping, but her tears were no longer the calculated, performative tears of a victim. They were the raw, ugly, and pathetic tears of a liar who had just been caught. The judge looked at her, her face a mask of pure, cold, and undiluted fury. Then she looked at me, and for the first time that day, her expression was not one of skepticism. It was one of a deep and profound sympathy. My lawyer, Jessica, put a hand on my arm, and she gave it a small, triumphant squeeze. For the first time in months, I felt a surge of hope so powerful, so brilliant. It was almost a physical pain. The quiet, unassuming observer had not just been a witness. She had been my savior. The war was not over yet, but the tide, in a stunning, beautiful, and completely unexpected reversal, had just, finally, turned. After Miss Evans stepped down from the witness stand, the entire courtroom was wrapped in a thick, stunned silence. The story my ex-wife, Karen, had so carefully, so masterfully constructed over the past few months had been utterly and completely demolished. It had not been dismantled by a team of high-priced lawyers or a mountain of counter-evidence from me. It had been brought down by the quiet, simple, and undeniable truth, delivered in the calm, steady voice of a third-grade teacher. The judge, a woman whose face had been a mask of stern, weary skepticism for the entire hearing, looked down from her bench. She was not looking at me anymore. Her gaze was fixed, with a cold and deeply, profoundly disappointed intensity, on my ex-wife. Karen had been weeping, but her tears had now stopped. She was just sitting at her table, her face a pale, ashen mask of pure, public humiliation. Her lawyer was just staring down at his legal pad, his own face a picture of a man who knew, with absolute certainty, that his case was not just lost, but incinerated. The judge cleared her throat, and the sound echoed in the silent room. "Mrs. Miller," she began, and her voice was no longer tired. It was a sharp, clear, and unforgiving instrument of the law. You have come into my courtroom today under the guise of a concerned mother, seeking to protect your child. You have painted a vivid and emotional picture of your ex-husband as an unstable, negligent, and unfit parent. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle, and then she continued, her gaze unwavering. This court heard the testimony of a credible, professional, and deeply concerned third-party observer, a witness whose only interest in this case is the well-being of your daughter, Lily. And Miss Evans has painted a very, very different picture. A picture not of a negligent father, but of a neglectful mother. A picture of a parent who is, at best, profoundly self-absorbed and at worst, dangerously careless. A parent who is so focused on her own narrative, her own drama, that she has, on multiple occasions, failed to provide her own child with the most basic necessities of care, a winter coat, a packed lunch, and her own undivided attention. The judge looked down at the pile of documents Karen's lawyer had submitted. This court finds the allegations you have made against Mr. Miller to be not just unsubstantiated, but to be a malicious, manipulative, and deeply dishonest attempt to poison your daughter against her father and to interfere with his legal right to custody. It is, frankly, one of the most egregious cases of parental alienation I have seen in my 15 years on this bench. Karen let out a small, strangled sob. Therefore, the judge declared, her voice now a final, booming verdict. Your petition for sole custody is not just denied. It is dismissed with extreme prejudice. The current shared custody arrangement will remain in full effect. She then looked directly at Karen, her eyes as hard as stone. Furthermore, I am ordering you, Mrs. Miller, to enroll in and complete a 12-week court-mandated parenting class, and I am issuing a formal, written warning any further attempts by you to undermine your daughter's relationship with her father, any further use of your child as a pawn in your own personal dramas, and you will find yourself back in this courtroom, and the outcome will be very, very different. Am I clear? Yes, Your Honor, Karen whispered, her voice a small, broken sound. This hearing is concluded, the judge said, and she banged her gavel, a sharp, final sound that was the death knell of my ex-wife's war against me. I walked out of that courtroom feeling like a man who had just been pulled from the wreckage of a terrible crash. I was bruised, I was battered, but I was alive, I was free. In the hallway, I saw Karen. She was surrounded by her own legal team, her face a ruin. She looked up and her eyes met mine for a brief, fleeting second, and I saw in them not anger, not hatred, but the hollow, empty look of complete and utter defeat. There was nothing left to say between us. I just gave her a small, sad nod, and I walked away. I found Miss Evans standing with my lawyer, Jessica, near the elevators. I walked up to her, my heart so full of a gratitude so profound I couldn't find the words. Ms. Evans, I began, my own voice a little shaky. Heiress, I don't know what to say. You saved my life today. You saved my relationship with my daughter. Thank you is not a big enough word. She just smiled, a small, humble, and deeply kind smile. I didn't do anything, Mr. Miller, she said. I just told the truth. And I did it not for you, or for your ex-wife. I did it for Lily. She is a wonderful little girl, and she deserves to have a wonderful father. I was just doing my job. In that moment, I understood what a real hero looks like. They are not always the people who win the big, flashy courtroom battles. Sometimes, they are the quiet, decent, and observant people who just, in the course of their daily lives, pay attention. The people who see a child who is cold, or hungry, or sad, and they decide to do something about it. I gave her a hug, a gesture that was probably unprofessional, but I didn't care. You are an incredible teacher, Miss Evans, I said. Please, she said with a small laugh, call me heiress. A year has passed since that day in court. My life, and Lily's life, is quiet now. It is peaceful. The storm has passed. The shared custody arrangement is no longer a source of tension. It is just our life. Lily is thriving. She is a happy, confident, and brilliant 8-year-old who is, According to her new fourth grade teacher, at the top of her class in both reading and art, Karen is different, the court-ordered parenting classes, and the profound public humiliation of that day in court had a real, and I believe, a lasting effect on her. The sharp, ambitious, and self-absorbed woman I had known is softer now, quieter. The constant, desperate performance of her life seems to have ended. And she has, for the first time in a long time, started to be a real, present, and engaged mother. Our co-parenting is no longer a battle. It is a tentative, but real, partnership. We talk about Lily's schoolwork, about her friends, about her dreams. We are not friends. I don't know if we ever will be again, but we are. Finally, what we always should have been two parents, united in our love for our daughter. Last week was the fall parent-teacher conference, and for the first time, we went together. We sat side by side in the small, third-grade chairs in Miss Evans's classroom, and we listened, together, as she told us, once again, what a wonderful, bright, and deeply special little girl we had. And we were both just proud. It was a small, quiet, and beautiful moment of peace, a moment I had once thought was lost to me forever. I think often about the lessons of that terrible, beautiful year. I learned that a lie, no matter how beautifully constructed, is no match for the simple, quiet, and relentless power of the truth. I learned that being a father is not about being perfect. It is about being present. It's about showing up. For the parent-teacher conferences, for the field trips, for the long, patient, and sometimes frustrating work of building a diorama of a pig and a spider. But the greatest lesson I learned is that the real heroes of this world are often the quietest ones. They are the ones who are not seeking the spotlight. They are the ones who are just, in their own small, decent way, paying attention. They are the teachers, the nurses, the social workers, the quiet observers who, in the course of doing their jobs with integrity and compassion, have the power to change a child's entire world. So I'll leave you with this. The next time you see a teacher, thank them. They are the guardians of our future, the protectors of our children, the unscheduled witnesses who, when called upon, have the courage to stand up and tell the truth. Thank you for listening to my story. If you've ever had an unexpected hero show up in your own life, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Hit that subscribe button, and let's all raise a glass to the quiet. Everyday heroes who make this world a better and a safer place for our children.